Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Miko, and it's a pleasure to have you join the inaugural episode of my show dedicated to navigating the complexities of the China economy. The goal of this program is straightforward yet crucial. I aim to provide international investors like yourselves with unbiased facts and figures about the China economy and its financial markets, complemented by my personal insights. The inspiration for this show stems directly from conversations I've had with many Chinese global investors. They've expressed concern over the significant misunderstandings that many foreign investors, particularly in Europe and the United States, have about the Chinese market. These misconceptions, in my view, are often perpetuated by misleading narratives in the Wall Street medias and a lack of underground perspective in many sell-side research reports. Today, I want to focus on three key areas. Firstly, we'll delve into China's recent economy data releases. Secondly, we'll unpack the current market chatter surrounding the PBoC's monetary policy stance. And finally, we'll examine the current policy direction being signaled by the administration. Let's start with the economic data. I've compiled 4 charts showcasing the most crucial and widely watched indicators: GDP growth, CPI inflation, aggregate financing data, and real estate sector figures. These 4 data directly address the most prevalent narratives surrounding the Chinese economy today: Japanification, including peak growth and deflationary pressures, balance sheet recession, and potential systemic risks within the real estate sectors. The charts I'm using are all sourced from China's National Bureau of Statistics. In the top left corner, we have China's quarterly GDP growth rate. Q1 growth exceeded many sell-side and international institutions' forecasts. However, it's crucial to note that the GDP deflator came in at minus 1.1%, indicating deflationary pressures. This is further corroborated by the CPI data in the top right chart, where we can see inflation hovering precariously close to zero for an extended period. Moving to the bottom left, we have total social financing data, a unique indicator to China. To draw a parallel with the US, this metric is roughly equivalent to total bank lending combined with all bonds and securitized issuance plus equity financing. A robust figure here indicates healthy funding demand within the economy. Clearly, China is facing a slowdown in funding needs, with April even witnessing a rare contraction. Notably, household loans declined by 500 billion RMB, and recent hints from officials suggest May's data might not paint a rosier picture. This credit crunch is intrinsically linked to the ongoing contraction in the real estate sector, which has triggered a broader pullback in lending. Previously, China's credit growth model relied heavily on the money creation chain via household mortgages fueling property development. Local governments are also deeply involved in this chain. Now China's credit growth is caught in an awkward transition phase. We will discuss this issue later. This chart in the bottom right corner illustrates this challenge. It shows the YoY growth rate of national real estate development investment, which has been negative for the past year. Furthermore, the growth in both the floor area and value of new residential property sales has worsened in the first 4 months of this year. While the real estate sector has received some policy support in recent months and weeks, it may take time for sentiment to shift and translate into tangible improvements in the data. Having examined the key economy data points, let's shift our focus to the second topic: China's monetary policy outlook. Given the weak economic performance, there have been persistent market expectations for both fiscal and monetary easing since the reopening in mid-2022. Let's delve into the potential trajectory of monetary policy first. Undoubtedly, Undoubtedly, the PBOC is currently in an balancing mode. Comparing to the aggressive easing measures adopted by developed economies, the PBOC's approach to balance sheet expansion and interest rate cuts has been relatively cautious and conservative. In fact, the total size of the PBOC's balance sheet has actually contracted by 3 trillion RMB since the beginning of this year. Additionally, key lending rates, such as the 5-year loan prime rate (LPR), have remained unchanged for 10 months. This divergence from the widespread expectations of media and market participants has sparked debates about the considerations behind the PBOC's policy choice. The central bank's reluctance to pursue more aggressive easing has led to a sense of disappointment in some quarters. In my view, it's highly unlikely that the PBOC will copy the easing playbook of developed economies. Neither conventional nor unconventional monetary policy tools can be directly copied from Western experience onto the Chinese context. Firstly, the PBOC remains concerned about the potential for yuan depreciation stemming from interest rate differentials if it were to cut rates aggressively. Governor Pan's recent comments during a press conference, where he explicitly mentioned monetary CNBC news and the Federal Reserve policy move, indicates that the PBOC is wary of creating a significant policy divergence with major central banks that are maintaining a higher for longer interest rate environment. Secondly, the PBOC do have doubts about the effectiveness of monetary transmission in the current economic environment. There are concerns that a broad-based credit expansion might not translate into new credit growth drivers. In other words, simply flooding the system with liquidity might not be enough to restart the engine, as the private sector is currently in deleveraging mode, and the already burdened banking sector might not be able to effectively channel funds to productive uses. However, one puzzling aspect is that real interest rates are already relatively high in the context of low inflation. Yet the PBOC seems hesitant to fully utilize interest rates as a policy lever. Some argue that this might be linked to the concerns about pressures on banks' net interest margins. Some argue that, however, I believe that high real interest rates can also create pressure on banks due to a potential rise in non-performing loans. Thirdly, if we haven't seen the PBOCs deploy conventional tools like substantial rate cuts, expecting a full-fledged quantitative easing program is even more unrealistic. While some international media outlets have been speculating about the possibility of QE in China, even if the PBOC were to engage in asset purchases, their nature would be fundamentally different from QE. It would likely resemble open market operations aimed at managing liquidity conditions, rather than a large-scale asset purchase program designed to directly lower long-term interest rates. In contrast, the PBOC's current approach to utilizing targeted lending facilities for specific sectors bears a closer resemblance to the ECB's targeted longer-term refinancing operations. In conclusion, regarding monetary policy, I advise everyone to abandon unrealistic expectations and face reality. China is unlikely to implement a Western-style monetary easing program. The PBOC faces constraints from external pressures, administrative limitations, and market dynamics. Now let's address the topic of administrative policy goals and fiscal policy. Current discussions surrounding China's fiscal policy are centered around two key issues: the issuance volume of specific sovereign bonds and the central government's debt capacity. The former is linked to the persistent downward pressure on long-term Chinese government bond yields, while the latter touches upon China's fiscal management and broader administrative objectives. We'll talk about the long-term rate issue in the next episode. Despite frequent headlines in the Wall Street medias regarding potential large-scale issuance of special sovereign bonds, the actual amount has been relatively modest at around 1 trillion RMB. There have been discussions among researchers and academics about whether the PBoC should consider backing the Treasury with MMT-style money creation. This would represent a significant shift to the PBoC's money anchor from the historical reliance on credit tools to banking systems and foreign exchange reserves. However, the PBoC appears reluctant to engage in deep monetary fiscal coordination. Instead, we are witnessing a fiscalization of monetary policy tools, with the central bank increasingly relying on innovative industry-specific lending facilities. It's crucial to understand that the Ministry of Finance, as the government's financing arm, doesn't have the ultimate authority to determine the direction of spending. Therefore, I believe that China's fiscal challenges are fundamentally rooted in administrative priorities. The government needs to clearly define its administrative goals and then utilize fiscal and monetary levers to achieve them. This week, the government highlighted high-quality full employment as a key objective, which has garnered significant attention. A policy focused on supporting the household sector is certainly welcomed. Many of the previous support measures, including those aimed at the real estate sector, seem to prioritize supply-side improvements rather than directly addressing demand-side constraints within the private sector. If the central government leverages its debt capacity to strengthen the social safety net and shift fiscal expenditure away from market and industrial support towards social security and public welfare, prioritizing demand-side support, it would be perceived as a positive signal by the market. However, it's important to remember that the Chinese governance model operates on a stock allocation logic. Don't expect the government to act like a charitable organization, providing direct, external, and unconditional free lunch money to solve current challenge. That concludes our topics for today. In the next episode, we will delve into the current market dynamics within China's equity, bond, and foreign exchange markets. Thank you.